Let's get the conversation started. For most Nigerians, the current economic climate has been begging for a much more substantial solution that will help address absorb at least the shocks that many Nigerians, millions of Nigerians have been subjected to, especially since the removal of fuel subsidy in May last year. Cue in the tripartite National Minimum Wage Committee that was inaugurated by Vice President Kashim Shettima with a goal to really look into what Nigerian workers need that will help absorb some of those shocks. And of course, the minimum wage has always been a part of the national discourse in giving workers fairer wages. But of course, there's also the conversation around what the current economic reality could mean in setting the ceiling or the floor as far as wages are concerned. Well, let's speak to someone who pretty much has an idea about, the track record, where we are right now, where we're likely going to head towards, as that April deadline, according to the government, is flexible, but the government would rather have their recommendations on or before April 1st. Joining me right now in the studio is Adewale Smart Oyerinde. He's from the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. It's actually the Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. Mr. Smart, thank you so much for joining us in the program. Good morning to you.
Thank you for having us, and good morning.
Good to see you. Right, first and foremost, your thoughts on the formation of the tripartite committee and what it means, what it represents for Nigeria and Nigerians.
Thank you once again. I think the formation of the committee, I think we've been expecting it for a while. The last committee ended its work in October 2018, actually 5th of October. That was when the last meeting of that committee was held. And as we said, NECA played a very significant role in dousing the tension and making sure a recommendation of 30,000 was made to the federal government then, which eventually the federal government approved as a national minimum wage. So we saw this coming. It has been, we've canvassed for it, and the government has played its part in constituting the committee yesterday. It was a full house with the Vice President moderating the session, and the Secretary of the Federal Government also playing a critical part. For us, the work of the committee has commenced. There was an inaugural meeting, and we just look forward to a very interesting deliberation when the meeting and the negotiation eventually starts.
What is your reading of the current situation, from the body language of the government, from the body language of organized labor, from your input? What is your reading of the temperature in the room during that inaugural meeting?
The temperature was cordial. I wouldn't go into the context of reading body language, because a good actor can show you whatever you want, whatever he or she wants to see. But what would just align with the context of the framework. There is a Convention 131 of the ILO that specifies minimum wage fixing, and that same convention, we've implemented it. We use this as the framework for the negotiation that battered 18,000. We used it it was also the framework that we used for the negotiation that battered the 30,000. So our view is the same parameters subsist, that the same way we went that way, then the same way we go this way. The variables probably differs now. The economic situation probably differs. The needs of workers and their families probably differs now. The situation of organized businesses probably differs now. So it's those variables that will come into play in arriving at the national minimum wage. But suffice to say this, that by reason of work, I'm a member of the ILO governing body, and we also have the Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland, also being the chairman of the ILO governing body. So the eyes are on us. We can't afford.
The bar is high.
The bar is high, and then the eyes of the world is on us, because yes, we are playing a very critical role at the ILO, and we should be seen to represent those values, those conventions and recommendations that we have subscribed to, that should guide this process. That is the list of our expectations.
For some Nigerians, if not most, right, even the 30,000 naira minimum wage was successfully undermined by the subnationals, for instance, where over 70% of them have failed to implement it. why are we forging ahead? Why is this, not the conversation that we're having? Because it does appear that, from the inauguration yesterday, the Vice President stopped short of saying manage your expectations when he talked about, the capacity of the various tiers of government to deal with any increment in the wage bill. What can you tell us about whether that is a part of the conversation that would inform some of the recommendations you'll be having, where we're coming from and where we are today and where we need to be in the future?
Well, it's easy to talk about the past, about the 30,000. It was a consensus, significantly a consensus, and everybody agreed 30,000 should go, which was signed. Now, the constraints that we saw in the implementation, then we wouldn't have done well if for 4 years or 5 years we refuse to address those constraints. Why are we unable to pay the 18,000, or why are some states unable to pay the 18,000? If those constraints, if they've not been dealt with for 5 years, then we wouldn't have done well. If the issues that bedeviled the implementation, because there's also an implementation report to assess why subnationals are not paying, or why are they not paying, or why can't they pay, or why they refuse to pay. There are three different contexts. Right. You either refuse to pay, you are not able to pay, or you just can't pay. So there is also an implementation report.
Because I think can't is out of the question for most Nigerians. It's a question of willingness to pay.
Exactly. As I look, it's the subnationals basically have their issues. They have their historical issues. Now, whether those historical issues, to their extent, they might say is valid. But to the extent of those that are suffering, bearing the brunt of not receiving that minimum wage, it's not valid. And the figures, the facts, we will play with the figures and the facts. So if you bring the figures and the facts out, and let's see the reason, tell us the reason why you can't pay. But definitely for us, according to the convention 131 of the ILO, you must look at the needs of the workers and their families. You must look at the economic situation, the economic context. You must look at the need for us to ensure sustainable enterprises. Because if you set the minimum wage too low, you are not taking workers out of poverty. You are creating more problems for yourself. If you set it too high, then you have set the foundation. Right. Yes, you've set the foundation for non-compliance. You've set the foundation for a lot of crises. So those parameters, is what everybody will bring to play. And hopefully, with good faith, I believe strongly, and our association believes strongly, that we have a smooth conversation at National Minimum Wage Negotiation Committee.
Some say the time to discuss national minimum wage has passed. It's time to discuss living wages. Where do you stand on that? And is there a common denominator between the two, minimum wage and living wage?
Well,
because that's what most Nigerians say they need in this time of economic.
To set the board straight, as employers, we don't have any problem with living wage. We don't have any challenge with the issue of paying living wage. I think it's very important that we set that straight. But there must be a framework for arriving at living wage. Now, for the minimum wage, we had the convention already. And conventions are outcomes of conversation by the tripartite, by the workers at the global level, by the employers at the global level, and by the government at the global level. And after so many deliberations, they came up with convention, and they came up with recommendation that specifically guides how you arrive at a national minimum wage. Now, for living wage, the conversation is ongoing, even at the ILO level. And there is no framework yet that has been agreed to say, okay, this is the steps, or these are the elements that will constitute a living wage. As I mentioned earlier, for national minimum wage, you consider the needs of workers and their families, you consider the economic situation, you also consider economic situation including the ability to pay, you consider the need for sustainable enterprises. For living wage, there's no parameters like that. And conversation
use the
is
same
ongoing.
parameters, because it feels like they're one and the same. We're all talking about the economy. What kind of shocks, do shock absorbers do families need, do workers need to be able to sustain? What is the inflationary trend like? I mean, one would say the data is
well,
there.
it's different a bit. Living wage is as in context, has more value. It speaks to more value. It speaks to a greater need than minimum wage. Minimum wage is the least amount that the least worker should not earn. So it speaks more to the most vulnerable. So minimum wage speaks more to the most vulnerable, that the least paid worker should not earn below this. But living wage speaks to a bigger context and a bigger framework. So hoping that, even as at Friday last week, the International Organization of Employers, that's the global employers body, we still had conversation on the issue of living wage. Because everybody's coming up with framework, everybody's making recommendation to the ILO to say, yes, living wage, we don't have problem, but we need to have a framework so that the context of living wage in Nigeria is the same context of living wage everywhere, the way we have adopted the ILO Convention 131 on national minimum wage.
Based on where we are right now, give me a sense of where we rank in the Committee of Nations as far as paying minimum wage is concerned. Because I get the feeling that we're not doing well, especially if we dollarize 30,000 naira today.
Yeah, when you dollarize it, the context changes, And some will argue we are not.
Isn't that the international standard?
No, it's quite different. You work those processes within the context of your national realities. If you take it out of your national context, then it changes the whole narration of conversation. 30,000, if you convert it to dollars, that's about. That's an embarrassing amount, and nobody can really survive with that amount. So, for us, while we look forward to negotiating and coming up with a minimum wage that will be acceptable, that will be practical, and that will be implementable for all and sundry, we also have to work through it within the context of our national realities. We cannot take it away from those realities. Now, it's now for government to now take more proactive steps in reviving the economy. While they are doing a lot to stabilize, to get us to the growth trajectory, but more needs to be done so that we don't create problems for ourselves. Because whether national minimum wage, whether living wage, whatever context you look at it, they are all hanging on economic growth. If the economy is not growing, then even the minimum wage, pay 100,000. The crisis in the economy will still nullify it. Inflation is going to 30%. Interest rates of organized businesses is also shooting up. So you just create, if you're not careful, you create systems that continually negate or neutralize each other. You pay 100,000, the economic situation that is going south will negate or neutralize the effect of 100,000. With a good economy, if you get it right economically, even if you pay 15,000, or you pay 30,000, or you pay 35,000, or you pay 10,000 minimum wage, you realize the economic situation and the value of your currency, the value of the naira, will make it, we suffer it because the other economic variables, the currency is strong, cost of living is low, so the value of the naira makes the minimum wage to be more sustainable than we currently have. So we're just hoping for a very interesting and practical negotiation.
Yeah, and in talking about the practicality of these negotiations, we, as you stated, we're not under an ideal situation right now, in an ideal economic situation right now, where we can, perhaps boost our expectations and say, listen, Nigerian workers are going to get some kind of improvement. And I suppose, as representative of employers in this country, businesses are also not doing particularly very well, at least not most of them.
Absolutely.
Give me a sense of how the committee normally balances things out between the government, even at the government level. There's the federal, there's the states, there's the local governments, and then there's the private sector involved. How do you counterbalance each other when you're discussing wages at this level?
You know, the organized labor will naturally come up with its demand. Government will come up with its demands, justifiably so, with parameters to say this is what we have. And as it is, we're in an open system. You know, you can check how much is in the federation account. You can check how much the businesses are earning through their AGM reports, their annual reports. You can check a lot of things. The Bureau of Statistics will share statistics, we share information. Different agencies that have contiguous role, we also share information as per data, as per so many of those economic indices. Now you just look at all those parameters, and you start substituting. Either you are substituting or you are removing. Okay, this is not applicable, or this is applicable. This is the amount in the pot that we have to spend on this. Also noting that workers are a segment, a critical segment of the economy. And you still have other stakeholders in the economy that you have to deal with. You have the elderly that you have to deal with. You have the pensioner you have to deal with. You have the national development infrastructure you have to deal with. So you bring in all those variables and say, look, this is what is desirable. But in the context of now, this is what we can pay. And that is what played out in 2018. And as I mentioned earlier, and it's an endeavor, one big endeavor that we are proud of. That the employers in 2018 played a very significant role in dousing the tension and also getting government and organized labor to come to the middle ground and agreeing on that 30,000.
So if there was like a shouting match in the negotiation process, NECA is somewhere in the middle, mediating and calming things down.
Well, we expect there won't be shouting match because everybody we have governors in the meetings. We have.
Nigerians expect their labor representatives to definitely shout, because I mean the reports we keep getting is part of life. Life is getting
It's part of the game. It's part of the spices that makes the negotiation interesting. But on the long run, I said, with one very important element: good faith. Good faith. Good faith. With that very important element, everybody coming to the table with good faith, then in fact, the negotiation can be concluded in 1 month.
And before we talk about the April 1st deadline, even though the government said it's flexible, let's talk about the issue of capacity, because in the 2024 budget, for instance, at the national and subnational level, none of them had considered, what the new minimum wage would look like, because it will be tantamount to jumping the gun, because nothing has been set yet. And even with the current budget, our deficit is quite significant, and Nigerians are more than worried about our borrowing pattern. Let's talk about that and how it further complicates things, because all of these budgets have already been passed at the federal and at the subnational levels without any input from the new minimum wage. Give me a sense of how that would look like, especially when it comes to implementation, because if they haven't budgeted for it, they have the perfect excuse not to implement it when it is finally agreed upon.
For government, it's I don't want to say it's easy. For government, there is always a way out. There is supplementary budget. You can come up and come up with a supplementary budget. You can. Before now, we have ways and means where the federal government is printing money or finding a way around that process of deficit. So for government, it's all about doing a supplementary budget, which we have seen over time that government have done and they are still doing. I don't want to mention they can borrow, because it won't hard up.
We have been borrowing to pay salaries.
We have been borrowing, yes. Yeah. But I think we have canvassed that the time to really stop borrowing is now. The debt is also we are mortgaging the future of generations that are yet unborn. So borrowing might not be an option that we will canvass, but supplementary budget can be one option. Then we have to look at the leakages in the system. Leakages, deal with corruption, deal with excesses, imbibe true fiscal discipline. That way you'll have saved a lot to address whatever issues that we have. For the private sector, it's a different ball game. Interest rate is going up on the roof. So a private sector business, your propensity or the options for you is quite limited. And that's why we have businesses that couldn't take it anymore, leaving the shores of this country, which is also another deep problem for us. So for the private sector, we're also ahead of the game in all contexts. Remember in August last year, when the president made the announcement to the nation about the removal of subsidy, and he specifically commended the private sector for taking the lead in providing succor to their employees. Before the 35,000 award by the federal government, the private sector has done quite a bit to ameliorate the challenges for its employees. And currently, if you check around the private sector, sectorally, we're also doing much more than the 30,000 that is the national minimum wage. So the private sector is more responsive, notwithstanding its many multi-dimensional challenges that is facing. And we hope that we'll still continue to play that role. Trusting that government will do its bit to provide or continuously provide an environment that is hospitable and that will enable the private sector to play its role of national development.
We understand that the demands or the proposals may seem outrageous at first. I mean, before the 30,000 naira minimum wage was agreed upon, I think the TUC was canvassing for somewhere between 150,000 or thereabout. The NLC was canvassing for around 80 to 90,000. We ended up with 30,000, which was quite disappointing, to be honest, as a worker myself. But looking at where we are today and how the new minimum wage back in 2018 has been completely eroded with the inflationary trend, with the current economic realities, cost of living is to the roof. Give me a sense of what it's like in the private sector, because the concern in the private sector is that, listen, you can absorb these shocks by right-sizing or downsizing, whichever one you choose, to lay off some staff, because we've seen so many people lose their jobs over the past few years because of the current economic climate. Cost of production has gone up for businesses. They're not able to make ends meet, so they have to lay off some staff significantly, which is further compounding the situation in the country. Give me a sense of how businesses can survive any sort of significant increment in the minimum wage, without people losing their jobs.
2019, during COVID, 2019, 2020, during the height of COVID, that was probably one of the most difficult times for enterprises. We were not working, businesses were not operating, and you still need to keep employees. And so we had an MOU with organized labor that employers will not disengage staff. An MOU that we were faithful to, and an MOU that we kept faith with. So the private sector has not been given the kind of regard or the kind of respect it should get in this economy because of its contribution. Now, for us moving forward, we've canvassed a lot of innovation. Everybody, whether in the private sector or the public sector, you have to imbibe a high level of innovation. You have to review your business model. You have to come up with sustainability models, sustainability schemes that will make the enterprise not only to be sustainable, but to be competitive. So before moving to the realm of competitiveness, we want to stay on the realm of sustainability. So retrenching or laying off staff will always be the last option. Will always be the last option for the private sector. But in the context of now, the conversation about retrenchment, about laying off or downsizing is not on our plate now. We are going to the negotiation with open mind, putting to the fore all the risks, all the opportunities, so that can guide the stakeholders, the tripartite, in the context of our negotiation. We cannot we cannot cut our nose to spite our face. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. I wouldn't want to go into the issue of what Labour has proposed, because it has not been presented to the committee. Right. So as far as to a large extent, it's still conjectures, it's still essay, it's what is brought to the table at the negotiation meeting. That's why we know, okay, this is what organized labor is asking, this is what organized private sector is proposing, and this is what government is proposing, and this is what the subnationals, what they are proposing, because on the long run, even the federal government cannot force down the throat of the subnationals, a figure. They cannot force down the throat of the local government, a figure, because if you do that, then you've created the first point of dissent, the first point of non-implementation. So we all work toward consensus. We believe so much in social dialogue. We believe so much in building consensus. And those are one of the strongest pillars that the ILO that has sustained the ILO for a long while. And being a critical member of the International Labour Organization, we also believe in driving consensus. No matter how naughty, how difficult those issues are, through effective social dialogue, and once again, good faith, we can arrive at a proper agreement even before the deadline that the government gave.
What is the standard international practice when it comes to addressing some of the challenges that could lead to non-implementation of some of these recommendations, like the one we've seen with the 30,000 naira minimum wage? Some of the governors in attendance, their states have, become perpetual non-implementers, so to say, of this minimum wage. And it's surprising to see that they're there also taking part in this next exercise. And for some Nigerians, there's no point in painting over these cracks without really addressing them, because we're only building people up, setting up Nigerian workers just to disappoint them at the end of the day. If they know that the new minimum wage is going to get passed only for it to not be implemented, I mean, it's just really unfair. But give me a sense of what we need to do, even at the committee level, to address the issue of non-implementation, because I suppose it's a slap even on your face as committee members to say that you've worked hard day and night to arrive at this figure, only for one governor to just, throw it under the carpet and say, listen, I'm not going to work with that because I can't afford it for one reason or the other.
The level of awareness now is very high. Unfortunately, we also have the Director General of the Governors Forum. At the inauguration yesterday, we have 6 governors representing the governors, as it were. And they've all made certain commitments to take a dispassionate look at the figure that will be arrived at. Now, I said, your first point of creating building blocks of non-implementation is when you arrive at a figure that is not sustainable. That's why you must listen to everybody. You must listen to everybody's constraints. You must listen to the realities, the challenges, and the opportunities that everybody is bringing to the table. If those realities are genuine, you can't tell me that you can't pay 18,000 and I see the kind of ostentatious life that you are living. It creates a breach in trust. So all of us must live within the context of that reality. We believe strongly, as the president have said through the vice president yesterday, that everybody, even the governors, must play a definitive role. They must attend the meetings. They must if they are not attending for whatever reason, they must send their deputies. So we believe, with the level of awareness that we have now, that the chances of default will be reduced. There will always be default, even at the global level. Variables change. Now the states are earning twice or thrice what they used to earn before, through the allocation at the federation account, before the removal of first subsidy. Will that play a major role in building their capacity to pay? Maybe. Now there is conversation about backward integration, conversation about each state actually going back to explore and exploit the natural resources that they have in their states. If they do that, will it increase their capacity to pay? Most likely. So it comes back to innovation. You have to find a way, you have to be ingenuine, an ingenuine way to build up your capacity to pay. If you are still waiting for allocation at federation account, then we might still run back to the issues that we face in time past. But I don't want to go into non-implementation, but we believe strongly that whatever is agreed on, all stakeholders will do well and will be true to that agreement and implement accordingly.
Talk to me about the April 1st deadline. We understand that it's a bit flexible, but usually from your experience, how long do these negotiations last, and what can we do to speed it up? Because by April, and we were talking about after the first quarter already. So Nigerians would love it sooner. Would have loved a new minimum wage even yesterday or last year when the subsidy was removed. But give me a sense of the timing as well as how long it usually lasts.
You know, your negotiation can take 1 month. Negotiation can take 2 weeks. You know, if organized labor come with this figure and government realize we can deal with this figure and the figure is comfortable to the private sector, you make a recommendation in 1 week. At the same time, negotiation can go for 1 year. You know, so the task of the chairman, the vice chair, or the secretary of the committee is to progressively and definitively bring everybody closer to consensus, and which is a very difficult task, I must agree. Bring everybody closer to consensus, and as I said, with good faith. We all know the realities, you know, we all know the economic realities, we all know the realities of workers, we all know the realities of businesses, we all understand our individual realities. So when we bring all those realities to the table and we look at those realities, then that will inform how well we progress, how bad we stall, or how naughty those issues will continue to be. But we believe strongly that the April timeline is visible, is realistic, with good faith. You know, I keep emphasizing good faith. With good faith, it's realistic, is achievable, and it's something that can be worked through.
The last time this committee was formed, we've had some challenges. I mean, the organized labor was going head to head with the then Minister of Labor, Chris Ngige, on this one. And for quite some time, the sittings were not even being held because of the loggerheads. Give me a sense of what has been said at the inaugural meeting. You did talk about good faith. You mentioned it twice or thrice now, and I believe that is becoming the theme of this negotiation right now. Give me a sense of what needs to be done to ensure that all three key players in this one, the government, the private sector, the organized labor, are not just in the same book, but we're all on the same page, driving towards the same destination about what is fair, what is realistic, and what is sustainable.
Well, we can be on the same boat and not be on the same page. You know, it's possible. It's possible we might not be on the same page, but it's the spirit of give and take that will play out. Now, when we say consensus, it doesn't necessarily mean we all agree. But we just it is not agreeable, but in the context of that disagreement, let's find a middle ground. It doesn't mean my disagreement has gone away. It doesn't mean my dissent or my issues have just disappeared. But we just agree, okay, for probably a bigger picture, probably for national interest, probably for sustainable interest. We say, okay, let's walk through this. That might be the game changer for all of us. You know, looking at the bigger picture. Yeah, things are not the way they should be, but notwithstanding, let's move forward with this. And it will be awesome if the committee can achieve what is the standard globally, where you deliberately create a machinery for wage adjustment, so that as the inflation rate is going up, there's a machinery that automatically adjusts the minimum wage. As inflation is going down, and as those economic parameters, as they are moving up and down, because they can't be static, that machinery to adjust minimum wage is always there. A few weeks ago, I had in one of the states in US, that because of this reason, the minimum wage for that state is now this figure, because the parameters, inflation was going up. So that machinery was put in place that initiates automatic adjustment. If we can achieve that, it will be one of the fundamental things that will help us to, you just realize as things are going south, the machinery is adjusting it. As things are going bad, going well, it's adjusting it. That way, the agitation will reduce. The tendency for conflict will also reduce. But Until we get to the committee meeting, then we push for all those.
Now, before now, there's the palliative committee that hasn't sat for quite some time because of the disagreement between the federal government and the organized labor. And all of that is tied towards the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy. And it was geared towards addressing the shocks that Nigerians are going through the CNG buses, to address the transportation cost crisis that we're dealing with, and all the other the wage award and things like that have also been reneged upon to some extent by the government. But give me a sense of what goes into the consideration, especially about those non-workers related issues, because there are a lot more Nigerians who are not workers today. We have an unemployment crisis that we're still dealing with. We have a poverty crisis that we're still dealing with, and the government will tell you that, listen, we have all these several palliative programs that is targeted towards addressing the needs of these people, the aged people, for instance, whether it's through the conditional cash transfer and all the other schemes that government have. How much of that does the government factor into the conversation to say, okay, if you're asking for X amount, it's going to take away from the limited resources that we have planned to address A, B, C, and D, who are not in this particular demographic that we're trying to negotiate for?
You know, I will resist the temptation to share strategies with government of what it has to say, or what you shouldn't say in the negotiation table. But in the context of the economy itself, those are the variables that should come into play. This is what we have as national cake. These are the other sectors that we have to deal with. This is the much we can give or we can commit to this cost, whatever the cost is, whether it's the national minimum wage cost, whether it's the social investment cost, whether it's the education loans cost, whether it's the need to take more definitive, give more definitive attention to the elderly, or give more definitive attention to infrastructure. Whatever the cost, government should be able to definitively apportion those costs, which we think they've done through the budget, with all its imperfections. And those are the things we think you can't negotiate out of that context. Basically, if you do, you have created a path towards non-sustainability of what you are going to commit to, and that was what we've seen in time past when government, either the ASU negotiation, whether the which other negotiation, it's all about government committing to something without taking due cognizance of the resources that are available. So you negotiated with ASU, you are not factoring the needs of NASU, you are not factoring the need of ASUP, that's the polytechnic workers. We
have health workers, we have doctors.
Exactly. So in the context of negotiation, the best practice would be, look, I want to address the issue of the educational sector. While ASU is agitating, and rightly so, look, in the context of this, let me address these whole issues with ASU, with NASU, with ASUP, everybody in that ecosystem. Let me address it within the context of these resources that we have for that sector, which is understandable. So the moment you don't do that, then you negotiate with A, and then after signing the agreement, you realize the other sectors are suffering, because everybody will always agitate, and rightly so too. So for us, it will be government doing its bit, coming up with genuine reasons why this is what it will do, because we don't want to run into a crisis of trust, because that's what might drag the conversation at the committee level forever. Because I also remember at that last meeting in 2018, it was 5th of October in Transcorp, Labour was almost declaring a strike because there was no headway. I said the employers came up and bridged the gap and caused the movement on both sides, on both Labour and government. We also had to move, from our figure to that 30,000. And so, look, we have moved. Okay, let every other person, let us move. And magnanimously, all parties agreed that, okay, let's make that recommendation to government.
I mean, you can understand the agitation as well as the frustrations of the organized labor, because
absolutely,
they are representative of the people in a way that, The frustration is usually
representative of the workers.
Okay, the workers who are also people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I understand. You also have your own people too, who are also people. But you know, in channeling the reality of the lives of Nigerians as things stand right now, how much of it is, you know, factored into the conversation around you know, the impact on lives and livelihood when we're talking about food security or insecurity, as the case may be, when people cannot afford grains, when people cannot afford to pay for their medical bills because drugs are too expensive for them to afford, when people are unable to pay school fees, when people are unable to pay rent because rent is going up, or even as things stand, they cannot afford to make ends meet because their purchasing power is lowered because of inflation and things like that. How realistic are these conversations? You know, from your experience being a part of this committee over the years, give me a sense of how, you know, attached to the Nigerian you know, lives are these conversations? How attached are they to you know, the reality of what people are going through? Not just the numbers. Obviously, you did talk about how the data plays a significant role in painting a picture of what can be done so that we don't bite more than we can chew. But how realistic is the conversation with regards to what Nigerians are actually going through and what needs to be done to cushion you know, the effect of the economy on them?
You know, unfortunately, you know, unfortunately, maybe by design and by context also, you know, the national minimum wage, you know, focuses on the conversation as it affects workers, as it affects employers, and it affects government also being an employer. You know, it doesn't, that's why I say unfortunately, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't stretch to the issue of Nigerians, to the issue of the masses, but this is a workplace issue, right? Now, the area where government plays a fundamental role is this, and that is why, you know, this conversation has been a bit muddled up with bringing in the context of what is happening on the streets, you know. Now, there are 3 or 4 things the economics, they call economic goods or wage goods. Now, if you take care of 3 or 4 things, you have substantially taken care of the whole strata of the economy. Transportation, whether you are an employee, you're an employer, or you are in the informal sector, you are affected by transportation. So if government takes care of transportation, definitively you have impacted everybody. Now, if you take care of food security, if you address the issue of food, substantially food security, you have impacted the life of everybody, whether you're a worker, whether you're not a worker. Shelter, if you address the issue of shelter, you have substantially addressed the issue that affects everybody in the economy, because those are the main items that all of us, whether you're a worker, whether you are middle class, you are lower class, that's what we all spend money on. Now, if government takes care of all those 3 items, the agitation naturally reduces. Right. Because you've taken care of food, you've taken care of shelter, you've taken care of you might not take care of everything, but you've substantially taken care of food, substantially taken care of shelter.
The essentials.
Exactly, taking care of transportation, which reduces the agitation. Now, the quantum of the minimum wage itself will have more value because transportation is no more a threat to what I'm earning. Food is no more a threat to what I'm earning. Shelter is no more a threat to what I'm earning. But now, if you take that context, if you take those 3 wage goods out of the context, if I'm challenged in all those 3 issues, then it becomes the items that will influence my negotiation. Right. And it will only influence my negotiation because every other person that is affected, every other Nigerian that is not in the formal or informal sector will find space in that argument because it is food. It is all of us. So you can't just say you want to give workers food, what of the others? It's transportation. everybody will find a voice in that negotiation that doesn't, in real sense, directly affect them.
And is that part of the parameters? Is that part of the terms of reference for this committee, or are you just sticking to just talking about the minimum wage?
Strictly the minimum wage.
Right.
You know, but government has the responsibility, constitutional responsibility, to take care of all those for Nigerians, basically.
Right. And I suppose it's one of those low-hanging fruits, especially when you talk about price control mechanisms that could help lower the price.
And the government mentioned it, the president mentioned it some time ago about the bringing back I can't remember the boards, these farm boards, and where they go buy foods, you know,
control the price
of food.
Commodities, right.
Look, if you take care of, you know, we have massive, I don't want to call it potential, because potential is becoming a vexatious word. You know, they say we have potential for 30, 60 years, we are still living on potential. So I don't want to call it potential. We have the opportunity to be a normal country. You know, I don't want to say a great country first. Let's be a normal country first before moving to the realm of greatness. The mass of land we have, food in the north. If you deal with that, you have dealt with food insecurity. If you deal with transportation, moving the food from the north, from the northwest, moving it to where it can be consumed, it can be bought, you have dealt with a significant part of those issues. And sometimes you just wonder why we find it difficult to achieve these little things.
All right. I know it's still early days, but just before we go, should Nigerians limit or manage their expectations about what may likely happen by April?
We survive through expectations. You know, the moment you lower your expectation, the good book said, as you have said into my ears, so shall I do unto you. So there's no need to lower your expectations. Keep your expectations. We all live in expectations. We all live in hope that our expectations will come to pass. So, without preempting what will happen at the negotiation table, I think Nigerians should be hopeful. I think the government have shown some level of sincerity. The private sector is also very sincere, is also very ready to play its part. And we hope that every other stakeholder within that context and that ecosystem of labor and employment relations, we all play our part to arrive at a very workable, achievable, and a consensus as a national minimum wage that will guide us through the next 4 years.
You know what they say, it's the expectation that kills. Sometimes having no, or the hope that kills itself. Sometimes having no expectations spares you the frustration and disappointment. But we're going to have to leave it here for now. Mr. Adewale Smart Oyerinde, the Director General, Nigeria Employers Association, I beg your pardon, Nigeria's Employers Consultative Association, who has been helping us navigate some of the issues around the minimum wage conversation, as the federal government just yesterday inaugurated the 37-man committee that will look into reviewing the new national minimum wage in the country. Thank you most kindly for your time this morning.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it will be time for us to take you through the front pages of some select national dailies this morning to bring you up to speed with the stories making the headlines. Newspaper review is coming up next. Welcome back to the program. Time for us to take a look at the front pages of some select national dailies this morning. So you can see the stories making the rounds today, Wednesday, January 31st. Let's begin with the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper for today. These are the stories on the front page of the Daily Trust. Airlines differ as CBN claims Forex backlog cleared with $64 million. We hear the CBN is trying to, run around, disburse and release some funds to cushion the volatility in the market and how badly the Naira is doing. But there's still a lot more that is happening with those disbursements as airlines are shedding a different light to some of the statements made by the Apex Bank. More on that story on page 23. Step aside if shoes are too big for you. Atiku tells Tinubu you're still nursing defeat hangover, according to the presidency. Well, the presidency's response was quite as strong as the statement made by the former vice president, who is talking about the performance of Tinubu as president. More on that story on page 5. Of course, you can see that. Don't miss it. It's a date, Friday, February 2nd, 6 p.m. Nigeria will send Angola packing. I hope I don't, eat my words back after that. But, yeah, hopefully the Super Eagles will fly high in that quarterfinal encounter. But the big story on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper is talking about what has become part of the systemic rot in the country. 26 states failed to implement new pension scheme 20 years after. We're talking about the contributory pension scheme. Federal government, private sector employees benefited. Experts urge governors to enroll workers. And pension fund asset hits 17 trillion naira. But of course, the story would profile all the states that are unable to do the needful in addressing the implementation of the pension scheme. More on that story on page 4. Tinubu tasked minimum wage committee to dialogue in good faith. IMF downgrades Nigeria's economic growth to 3%. Well, we're still at 3%, so that's good news if you ask me. Wike approves 30.9 billion naira for rehabilitation of schools. Good news there, as long as it adds value to the education sector. Page 20 has more on that. Into some disturbing development. Abductors place 100 million naira on Ekiti pupils. 6 of them were abducted alongside some of their teachers and staff. 4 others. President condemns killing of monarchs, tasks security operatives on rescue. And we also understand that some arrests were made in relation to the killing of some of the monarchs in Ekiti. And yeah, but nothing so far as regards to an update on the kidnapping of the pupils who were abducted, in a school bus alongside 4 others. Let's take a look at the next paper for today, the Nigerian Tribune for today. And these are some of the stories you can find on the Nigerian Tribune. Afenifere passes vote of confidence in Adebanjo. All right, I thought he was just announced as the former, or rather his removal was announced recently. Well, now Afenifere is passing a vote of confidence on Adebanjo and urges Southwest to equip Amotekun to deal with criminality, terrorism, stresses call for restructuring a new constitution. Labour proposes $300 living wage for Nigerian workers. Why are we talking dollars? I don't understand. The dollar equivalent of 300 though is quite a lot, if you ask me. Almost crossing over close to like 400,000 plus, I think, give or take. Demands payment of arrears of 35,000 naira wage award, anchor minimum wage on capacity, social justice, and Tinubu tells committee Nigerians' hope rests on decision of the committee. Okay, anchor minimum wage on capacity and social justice, according to the president, and the secretary to the government of the federation is saying Nigerians' hopes rest on decision of the committee. Well, those decisions are recommendations and is subject to a lot of other things also. But let's wait and see what happens before the April 1st deadline. The big story on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune talks about outrage over killing of Ekiti monarchs, kidnap of pupils. Abductors demand 10 million naira each for victims. So there are 10 victims, so that makes it 100 million, I think, just as reported on the Daily Trust. Tinubu Olubadan, Southwest speakers, Fayemi, Igboho, Gani Adams, others react. Representatives, House of Representatives call for rescue of abducted students. Teachers as spokesperson weeps over killing of traditional rulers. The Nigerian Senate summons security chiefs. PDP clears Shuaibu, Igodalo, 8 other aspirants for Edo Guba primaries. Is on, I guess, in Edo State. Federal government, or rather Forex backlog, I beg your pardon. CBN pays additional $64.4 million, says payment of all verified claims by airlines concluded. And we understand that the airlines are saying something entirely different. Atiku, presidency, trade words over Tinubu's private trip amid killings and kidnappings. In Osun State, Ifon Ilobu crisis, 2 killed, many injured as battle spreads to Oyo-Osun boundary. Police arrest 2 suspects. Governor Adeleke warns traditional rulers, and he has also reimposed a curfew in those areas. And at the very bottom, Better Edu, opposition targeting Tinubu's best hands, according to Sanusi. Which of the Sanusi is stating this one? Pick up the pages, pick up the paper of today's edition of the Nigerian Tribune to find out more. On The Guardian today, 7 states on Niger border, bandits, smugglers reign as sanctions, hardship, ground communities. So we talk about further destabilizing the polity, whether it's because of the current economic sanctions against Niger or the potential of Niger leaving ECOWAS. This paints some picture of what is likely to happen. CBN cautions forex dealers against market manipulation as Naira slides to 1,500 Naira. Police officers murder suspects, cultists, others nabbed over crimes in Ogun. More on the Metro page of the Guardian newspaper for today. Nigeria ranks 145 on Graft Index, scores 25 points out of 100 points. I'm surprised it's not the biggest story. It appears that we're doing well when it comes to fighting corruption. We've moved up 5 places, so whatever it is that we're doing seems to be working. Maybe we just need to scale it up. Workers demand living wage as federal government unveils negotiation committee. Tuition fees hike imminent as private schools spend fortune on security. Again, Senate summons service chiefs over insecurity. Sign executive order on unexplained wealth, Ndume tells Tinubu. And I think that's the way to go, especially if we're trying to fight corruption. People with unexplained wealth need to be, called in to answer some questions. Daily Independent is up next. And some familiar stories that we've already seen. Federal government says our modalities to lift national living wage. Inaugurates 37-man committee to foster motivated workforce. Killers of Ekiti monarchs will not escape justice, Tinubu vows, all the way from France. Foreign airlines fault CBN, says $650 million trapped funds unpaid. Is it supposed to be 65? Because I think it's 65 that's been reported across some of the pages. Well, more on that on the Daily Independent for today. On insecurity, Tinubu playing fiddle while Nigeria drowns. Atiku laments, says if shoes are too big for him, he should step aside. The presidency has also responded in kind. Inflation, forex volatility, force review of handling rates for airlines. APC considers contempt proceedings against Plateau Assembly Speaker. Yes, their members have not been sworn in as new members of the State Assembly. I wonder why. And you can read further on page 6. Federal government to establish recycling plants in 774 local government areas of the country. And Nigeria sees increase in active voices active voice internet subscriptions, drop in teledensity, whatever that means. It's available for you on page 7 if you're interested in doing so further reading. PDP clears all 10 aspirants for Edo governorship primary. Finally, Supreme Court affirms deregistration of Hope Democratic Party by INEC. Never heard of it. Maybe Mr. Ben Sherman, our newspaper review analyst, would tell us more about that as he joins us to take a deeper look into some of the day's big stories. Mr. Ben Sherman, former director of news at the Voice of Nigeria, is joining us as always in his very cheerful mood this beautiful Wednesday morning. Good morning, Mr. Ben Sherman. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I've declared Sunday wanted. Where is it?
Wanted? Not missing?
Wanted.
Okay. All right. I'm sure Sunday Michael will get the message. He's, unavoidably absent today.
Okay.
Still work related anyway. So let's get down to the brass tacks. Talk about this one, the big story on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. 26 states have failed to implement the new pension scheme 20 years after it was put in place, while the federal government and the private sector are fully in compliance with it. There is clearly this sense that there is no political will to do so. What are your thoughts about it?
Too many things rolling and rocking my head right now. I'm also quick to add that I'm into my 2 years after retirement. I've not seen a dime from the same government, so to speak. But you see, Abdullahi, this policy goes this way. Before now, on retirement, government will just give you your money, place you on some monthly stipend. Those who never got to build houses, those who wanted to go into business, they now have something to fall back on. But at the point 2004, government felt there should be this contributory pension scheme. Before you have paid your salary, your company takes something, or government takes something, saves for you. Then the government also sends its own counterpart funding. At the point you hear government was no longer sending its own, according to some people, yes, not the remitting. Now, in your own case, yes, yours was mandatory. Before they pay you, they take it. Now, if this is a federal law, does it mean that it has to be implemented hook, line, and sinker at the state level? Now, some people are regretting that we ought to be having what you call pre-2004 pension, where you just get your money, go do what you are doing. Today, people are there 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, waiting to see what they will get. And I tell you, Abdullah, many people are suffering. Some cannot afford what you call medicine, tablets, little tablets, to manage hypertension. Too many things are wrong. Some retired, no houses. Some retired, children are in school. Some retired, they have all sorts of debt to settle. Back in the villages, I mean, they look at them with some scorn. I mean, people deride them. You worked 35 years, 60-old man, you have nothing to show for it. But go and find out where many of these people worked. Honesty was their, was their flag.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of the states: Abia, Bauchi, Bayelsa, Ebonyi, Imo, Kogi, Nasarawa, Oyo, Sokoto, Taraba. While the likes of Akwa Ibom, Borno, Cross River, Kwara, Plateau, and Yobe are at the law enactment stage of adopting the scheme. It's safe to say that some of our political leaders are disingenuous. These are the same people who ponder and even put in place life pensions for themselves before they leave office.
Exactly, Abdullah. A man who was a director or director general before he retired became a minister, 2 pensions running, became a governor. Now you go back, you are a senator. And everything about you is so enshrined and entrenched. You also choose even where they will build houses for you, how many cars they have to change for you. But when it comes to that man in the street, he has become just a voter. And that is all. when elections are around the corner, you count him as how many voters you have. In the end, what does he get in return? That social contract binding you via Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, you know, that government will provide you security, provide you employment, provide you, I mean, what you call social security networks, so that you can live reasonable lives. They are not there. So the general fundamental principle of Chapter 2, where of the Nigerian Constitution as amended, is, in fact, it is enshrined that government is like God on earth for every Nigerian. But is it what we are having? Can you sue the government that there is insecurity? Can you sue the government that the roads are bad? Can you sue the government that the hospitals are bad? But these are things that are so enshrined in the Nigerian Constitution. So when it comes to pension, after a meritorious kind of service to humanity, to human beings, now, some people, your money is there. Every month that comes, they send an alert. This is what you have. But I can't touch it because the law is so couched in such a way that I can't go to the bank and say, I've finished my job. But every document needed for me to, in fact, you have to bring your letter of first employment, letter of last engagement. And
are you saying even the scheme itself needs to be fine-tuned?
Of course, the scheme needs to be fine-tuned. Tell me why a man, for example, you have 50 million naira, you have 60 million naira, 70 million naira somewhere. Some have as little I made a DPO, he's saying that his own pension is 6 million. You know, now, if someone has 40 million, for example, and he doesn't have a house, he was honest in work, and the money is there, why is it that he cannot just go, look, I've seen this house, and the house is 10 million. So out of my 40 million, I need 10 million now to pay for this house so that I move in. You now see that the man is still living in a rented apartment. He's borrowing to pay all of it. By the time this money comes, it's so useless, no value to him. Because
there's
what
also
he's going to have now, exactly, what you get now, inflation has already consumed it in advance. So it's a very big thing that government should look out for. And you see, Abdullahi, when this money is kept in these banks, and the pension fund managers are told, the interest, you can use them for business, but don't touch the principal. So you can see that people are busy enjoying money of these pensioners, grabbing money from the interest of the depositors.
It's a rather you know,
people are dying.
Yeah, a pathetic situation, especially the plight of pensioners in this country. But let's take a look at other stories. Let's talk about some of the politics that is happening in the country. The runner-up in the 2023 presidential election is talking again regarding the state of the nation. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, and he's calling on President Tinubu to resign if it's all too much for him, because he is not living up to expectation with all the security situation in the country over the past couple of weeks. And he, you know, really pretty much criticized him for flying outside of the country on a private visit, you know, while the country, according to him, is drowning.
You see, Atiku is doing his job. He's of the opposition. You don't expect that Atiku will be clapping for Tinubu or the government of APC. You know, even when they were campaigning, they will say, oh, don't vote for Atiku because he will always be running the country from Dubai.
Is it tantamount to overheating the polity? I know he has to be the opposition, but some are saying that the comments are unhelpful.
Well, you see, sometimes it's not as if the comments are too dangerous for the government to handle. It is just a kind of to put the government in check. If a government stays and nobody is saying anything, nobody is pressing you, nobody is condemning you, then you have to do some soul searching. So it's for Atiku, if they say the security situation is serious, of course, people now look at what is happening in Ekiti. Look at what is happening in many other parts of the country. You know, it's for government to now say, you don't need to say, okay, Atiku, I agree with you. It's for you to just simply do your own thing quietly and we have it better.
Silence the opposition.
Exactly.
By
And if you also say you're going to give students loans here and there, of course, just implement it so that it does not look like a government for the future. We are going to do, we are going to do, we are going to do. 4 years will pass. The next thing is we promise you we are going to do. Now we have gone into the designing stage. We are going to do, we are going to do, and time will just simply pass. But again, we cannot say that the government is not doing anything at all. It's trying according to its own limitations, its capability, and that's why when government says it's going to deploy, some technologies in terms of the fight against this security, of course, we expect that desk officers, those who are who are in charge, the moment you hear that, where's the Ministry of Science and Tech, where the SSS, the Army, the Air Force, they all have to come together. And in doing all of that, Abdullahi, when you begin to see that street lights are always being vandalized, I mean, CCTVs, they all are being vandalized. What kind of poverty are we having? And can't we, for example, begin to look at, when we say go to the market, let's check. Some of these things we have to know, bill of lading, where did you buy these things? We follow them. It does not just follow that you can give me receipt. We follow to where this receipt comes from, so that we track down and get these tips. Okay. Look at the manholes on the roads. These ions just to take care of water that will not run along the roads. All have been stolen here in Abuja. What is happening? Is that just our... And we are so religious, so religious. We kill in the name of religion. But when it comes to stealing, oh boy, you go and see Christians, Muslims, they join hands to do that. And thereafter, you go and kill yourselves in the name of religion. No, that one didn't say... he said something against my religion. Man, I think that something is really wrong, that we need some reorientation. We need some second looks of many things we are doing. And we need, I mean, preachers have been preaching, but when you see some preaching too, they tend to go the divisive side, kind of. And politicians, you see what this divide and rule policy, it's just not helping us. Right. Can we begin to have children that can come together, play together, eat together? You go to some states, I tell you, Christians will move to where they feel safe. Muslims will move to where they feel safe. Why is it so? You know, those days, I had a brother, to the Nupawa. You could see Yorubas, Igbos, you see people mixing together. But today, you just see that, oh boy, let me move to where I am safe. Right.
It's safe to say that the social fabric has been, significantly impacted by the current state of affairs, and much of that is security related, which is also further compounding the fault lines that we have in the country. But if we can just talk about the new conversation about the setup of the tripartite committee to look into the review of the new national minimum wage. What are your thoughts about this one? Are you cautiously optimistic about what they're going to give Nigerian workers before April 1st?
Exactly. Now, we have 3 tiers of government. You have the federal, okay, you have the state. They were there. Then you have the private sector. They will say organized private sector. You didn't put the local government. Very, very key. Because you have Algon. They constitute a workforce too, collectively. So we expect too that this, like they said, look at it passionately. A situation where some people today, they say everything, transportation, housing, peculiarity, all sorts of hazard allowance, you take everything 60,000 naira, 70,000 naira. And if you are living in Gwagwalada, you come into Federal Secretariat, how much do you spend per day to go and come back? And when you come, make sure you don't eat. At the point, some people will walk some distances just to reduce that payment they have to do. So we have to have some packages that will take care of workers who indeed, when you employ one person, do you know how many people that person is taking care of? Because of this dependency thing, extended family matter, a guy who is just a clerk, go and see, virtually everyone is waiting for him for fertilizer, for school fees, sickness, this and all that. So we need this committee to look at it seriously. And a situation where you have what you call salary for a certain worker is what one man will just stay in one restaurant and eat. We are working for the same government, but they say no, that one is more serious. I don't know which one is more serious. Okay, a doctor is there treating people ordinarily that other people are running away from. It's understandable. It's hazard. Look at the military. They all are in some trenches. Cold, yeah, people cannot go out, but they are outside there. How do you take care of them? We understand all those things. But it shouldn't be in such a way that there are some people down the valley there who indeed, no matter how they raise up their hand, you can't see them to even carry them. You know, it's always said that the baby that raises up its hand is the one the mother carries. In other words, there are some people down the valley there because situation has made them that they cannot have food. Hospitals, they can't go there. Even when you go to hospital, you are referred to another place. Go buy medicine. You go there, it's not there. Go for this lab test. Go for this. And that's why people begin to just take too many drugs. Been hooked here and there just to stay alive. So we expect that this tripartite committee ensure that people actually get something that is reasonable.
Right.
Because when you look at Nigeria, we cannot say that we are that poor. Look at the Better Edu matter. We are over close to 600 million. It's gone to one person. Look at money stolen in billions. You trace to one person. Now you go and get workers. Say you are giving them. We are talking of minimum wage, 30,000 naira. Now when President Tinubu came, he said we're going to do something for the interim from now to March. Now, when you do that and you are taking care of federal workers, what about the state? What about the local governments? So sometimes when you create you provide a solution, that solution creates some problems for some other people. You say take 30,000 at the federal level. Now, at the state level, some federal workers are living in Niger State. Are they being paid that way? They are in Suleja. Some federal workers are living in Nasarawa State, here in Maraba. So by the time you begin to compare notes, you say, oh, we are feeling better. And it boomerangs. The state goes, the local government, they begin to fight the state governors. But the state governors too, they're also not helping matters. If truly money meant for the local governments are given to the local governments, since the local government is a subsystem of the state, and the state is a subsystem of the federal, you have a counselor for health. They will handle health matters at the dispensary level. You have counselor for education. They look at primary school level and even the non-formal education, adult education. They will handle that. You have counselor for agriculture. What do you do with fertilizer distribution? What do you do with forestry? What do you do with animal husbandry at the local level, government level? Then you also have some for works. How do you take care of feeder roads? So, but when the state governor is just grabbing their money and nothing permeates, goes down to the local government, we're going to have people complaining at the local government level that the state is cheating them. The state will say, no, it's federal. And attention is moved and sent to the federal government, receiving the heat. That's why every time you see governors, we are running to the federal, coming to Abuja. And so that's why we're talking about devolution of power. The center is too powerful and over-concentrated with many things.
Okay, and it's safe to say that it's early days, but we hope for a robust negotiation that would deliver on the demands as well as expectations of Nigerian workers and Nigerians to a great extent, given the current economic climate in the country. Mr. Ben, as always, thank you very much for your invaluable and spirited contribution. Really appreciate the analysis. Thank you very much for stopping by this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And of course, this is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of the program. Thank you most kindly for joining us. Do remember, Daybreak returns tomorrow live at 8 a.m. on Trust TV. Until then, my name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you very much for your time. Don't forget, Trust TV's 360 Sports is coming up at the top of the hour. Good morning.